For 35 years, I was the invisible daughter, the one whose birthday was forgotten, whose achievements went unnoticed, whose presence at family dinners felt like an inconvenience rather than a celebration. But I never expected my own sister to hand me a wrapped box at my birthday dinner, smirk at the entire table, and say, "Maybe this DNA test will finally explain why you've always been another man's mistake in this family." The laughter that followed still echoes in my mind. Mom's nervous giggle, Dad's silence, the way Lily's eyes glittered with something that looked less like humor and more like hunger. I took that test, not because she wanted me to, but because I needed to know why she was so eager for me to take it. 3 months later, our family's estate lawyer called an urgent meeting. When Mom and Lily walked in and saw me sitting there with my own attorney, their faces went white. They thought they were burying me with that DNA test. They didn't know they were digging their own graves. Have you ever discovered that the people who were supposed to love you had been plotting against you all along? My name is Emily Carter. I'm 35 years old, a financial analyst who built her career through discipline and determination qualities I developed because no one in my family ever handed me anything. While my younger sister Lily received praise for simply existing, I learned early that my accomplishments would be met with indifference at best, criticism at worst. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than usual that evening. 3 months had passed since Dad's funeral, and this would be my first time back for what Mom called a small birthday dinner. I wasn't expecting celebration. I had stopped expecting that years ago, but something about Mom's voice on the phone had sounded strange, too bright, too casual, as if she were reading from a script someone else had written. When I walked through the front door, the first thing I noticed was laughter. Mom and Lily sat at the kitchen table flipping through a vacation brochure discussing beach resorts and spa packages. 3 months after burying their husband and father, they were planning tropical getaways. The grief that had consumed the funeral seemed to have evaporated entirely. I set down the bottle of wine I'd brought and kissed Mom on the cheek. She flinched slightly before recovering with a too-wide smile. Lily didn't bother getting up, just waved her fingers in my direction without looking away from the brochure. During dinner, I tried asking about the will reading. It had been 3 months, far longer than the usual timeline. Mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "We're just not ready yet, sweetheart. Still grieving." She glanced at Lily, who smoothly redirected the conversation to her recent promotion at work. I watched them exchange looks throughout the meal. Quick, nervous glances that carried entire conversations I wasn't meant to understand. They were coordinating something. I was certain of it. The dinner conversation orbited entirely around Lily, her children's achievements, her husband's new car, her plans to renovate their kitchen. When Mom finally acknowledged my existence, it was with a single question. "Still at that same accounting firm?" Before I could answer, Lily interrupted with another story about herself, but tonight felt different from the usual neglect. Lily kept watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, anticipation, perhaps, like a cat watching a mouse approach a trap. Mom drank more wine than I'd ever seen her consume, her eyes sliding away from mine whenever I tried to meet them. Then came the gift. Lily slid a wrapped box across the table, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Happy birthday, Emily." I thought this might help answer some questions you've probably had your whole life. Inside was a DNA testing kit. "Maybe this will finally explain why you've always been so different from the rest of us," Lily said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Who knows what secrets are hiding in your genes? You should definitely send it in. Don't you want to know who you really are?" The table erupted in laughter, but I noticed Mom's hands trembling around her wine glass, her knuckles white against the stem. And Lily's joke had felt rehearsed, delivered with the precision of something practiced in front of a mirror. That night I couldn't sleep. I found myself in my old bedroom searching through boxes I hadn't touched in years. In the back of my closet, I discovered an envelope already opened, the contents carelessly stuffed back inside. The dust pattern around it had been disturbed recently. Inside was a photograph of me as a baby, held by a man I had never seen before. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were 2 words, "Forgive me." I photographed everything with my phone. Then I picked up the DNA kit Lily had given me and made a decision. I would send it in, not because my sister wanted me to, but because I needed to understand why she was so eager for me to discover I wasn't really a Carter. Whatever trap Lily was setting, I intended to find it before it found me. I mailed the DNA test kit the very next morning. The company promised results within 4 to 6 weeks, so I used that time to do my own research. I started with the photograph of the unknown man holding baby me, my mother's plea for forgiveness written on the back. I scanned his face, searching for any resemblance to people my parents had known, but found nothing. The image quality was too poor for any facial recognition software to help. So I waited and I watched and I paid attention to every nervous glance my mother sent my way during our brief phone calls. The results arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 5 weeks after I had sent my sample. I opened the email at my desk during lunch, expecting confirmation of what I had already begun to suspect. What I found was both simpler and more complicated than I had imagined. No biological relationship detected with the Carter family reference samples. The word sat on my screen like a verdict. I was not my father's daughter. The man who had raised me, who had paid for my education, who had looked at me with what I now realized was a complicated mixture of duty and distance he had known. He must have known. And he had kept me anyway, even if he had never quite managed to love me the way he loved Lily. But the report contained something else. The DNA database had identified a genetic match, a connection to the family of a man named Richard Hayes. The system suggested he could be a close biological relative, possibly a father or uncle. The name meant nothing to me, so I did what any analyst would do. I researched. Richard Hayes had been a successful entrepreneur who built his fortune in commercial real estate during the 1980s and 90s. He had died 5 years ago, leaving behind a substantial estate and no immediate family. But what caught my attention was an article from 34 years ago, buried deep in an archived business journal. The headline read, "Local Investor Saves Struggling Manufacturing Firm." The firm was Carter Industries, my father's company. Richard Hayes had provided the capital that kept my family's business alive during its darkest period, right around the time I was born. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing through the implications. My mother had an affair with the man who saved my father's business. I was the result, and somehow everyone had agreed to keep the secret for 35 years. But why would Lily want this exposed now? I decided to force the issue. That evening, I took a screenshot of my DNA results and sent it to our family group chat with a single question. Anyone want to explain this? The reactions came quickly, and they told me everything I needed to know. Mom called within minutes, her voice thick with tears. She begged me to delete the message to let this go, to understand that some secrets were buried for good reasons. She talked about how complicated things had been back then, how she had made mistakes, how Dad had forgiven her, and they had all moved forward as a family. She never once apologized to me. She never acknowledged that I had spent 35 years feeling like an outsider in my own home because of a lie she had told. But it was Lily's response that confirmed my suspicions. She didn't call. She sent a text message, and her words carried no shock, no confusion, no sisterly concern, just cold satisfaction. Well, now you know. I guess that changes things, doesn't it? She had expected this. She had wanted this. The DNA test wasn't a cruel joke, it was the first move in a game I didn't yet understand. I called her that night demanding answers. The conversation started tense and escalated quickly. Lily had always been skilled at deflection, at turning every accusation back on the accuser, but this time her mask slipped. When I accused her of planning this, of deliberately exposing the secret for some purpose I couldn't yet see, she lost control. "I have protected this family's secrets for 20 years, she screamed into the phone. 20 years of keeping my mouth shut while you got to play the innocent victim, and now I'm going to make sure the right people get what they deserve." The line went dead. She had hung up on me. But those words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. 20 years. Lily had known since she was 16 years old, nearly 2 decades of holding this information, using it, weaponizing it. I thought back to all the times Mom had sided with Lily over me, all the financial gifts that flowed in one direction, all the excuses made for Lily's behavior while I was held to impossible standards. I had always assumed Mom simply loved her more. Now I understood the truth. Lily had been blackmailing our mother for 20 years, and every privilege she received was the price of her silence. But something had changed. Lily no longer wanted to keep the secret, she wanted it exposed, and her words about making sure the right people get what they deserve suggested this was about more than just family drama. This was about money. This was about the inheritance. I started asking careful questions to family friends, people who had known my parents for decades. What I learned made my blood run cold. One of my mother's closest friends mentioned almost as an afterthought that Lily had been asking about inheritance lawyers several months ago before Dad had even gotten sick. Another recalled Lily talking about upcoming changes to the family situation, speaking as if she knew something no one else did. I couldn't prove anything. I had no documents, no recordings, no concrete evidence of whatever scheme Lily was executing, but I had spent my entire career analyzing patterns, identifying risks, preparing for scenarios that others dismissed as unlikely. My instincts had never failed me in business, and they were screaming at me now. I found an attorney the next day, not a family friend, not someone connected to anyone my mother or sister might know, but an independent estate lawyer with a reputation for protecting clients in complicated inheritance situations. I explained my concerns, shared what little I knew, and asked her to help me understand my rights as a potential beneficiary of my father's estate. She listened without judgment, took detailed notes, and promised to investigate. 3 days later, a different call came. This one was from Mr. Harrison, the attorney who had handled my father's legal affairs for over 30 years. His voice was formal but not unkind. "Emily, there are things your father wanted you to know," he said. "Things he instructed me to share only under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met. It's time for the will reading, and I think you should be prepared for what you're going to hear." I agreed to attend the reading scheduled for the following week. Then I called my own attorney and asked her to accompany me. Whatever trap Lily had set, I was about to walk straight into it. But this time I would not be walking in blind. The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the entire top floor of a downtown building that had stood since my grandfather's time. I arrived 20 minutes early with my attorney Sarah Chen, who had advised me to observe everything and say nothing unless directly addressed. We took seats near the window, away from the main conference table, and waited. Mom arrived next, looking as though she had aged 10 years in the past month. Her face was pale, her hands clutched her purse like a lifeline, and she avoided my eyes completely as she took a seat at the far end of the table. She knew something was coming. The question was whether she knew exactly what. Lily swept in 5 minutes before the scheduled time, and the transformation in her demeanor told me everything. She was practically glowing with anticipation, dressed in her most expensive suit, her makeup perfect, her smile barely contained. She had brought her own attorney, a sharp-faced man I recognized from billboards advertising aggressive estate litigation. Lily caught my eye and gave me a look of such smug satisfaction that I felt my stomach tighten. She believed she had already won. Mr. Harrison entered last, carrying a thick folder that he placed deliberately at the center of the table. He was a man in his late 60s, distinguished and careful, someone who had known my family for decades. But today, his expression carried something I had never seen before, a quiet resolve, as if he were about to deliver news he had been waiting years to share. "Before we proceed," he began, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "I want to note that Mr. Carter gave me very specific instructions about how this reading should be conducted. He anticipated certain challenges to his final wishes, and he prepared accordingly. Everything I am about to share was arranged by your father during the final months of his life with full knowledge of circumstances that some of you may find surprising." Lily shifted in her seat, her smile faltering slightly. This was not how she had expected things to begin. Mr. Harrison opened the folder and began to read. "I, Robert James Carter, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home, my investment portfolio, and my ownership stake in Carter Industries, to Emily Carter, the daughter I chose to love not because of blood, but because of character." The room exploded. Lily was on her feet before the last word left his mouth. "This is exactly what I expected," she shouted, her composure shattering completely. "She is not his real daughter. We have DNA proof, now proof, that she submitted herself. She has no legal claim to any of this." Mr. Harrison waited for her outburst to subside, then continued reading with infuriating calm. "The will states, and I quote directly, 'I have known, since Emily was 2 years old, that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her anyway, and I choose to leave her my legacy because she alone has proven worthy of it. This decision was made with full knowledge of Emily's parentage and requires no further validation.'"
Traço.
The color drained from Lily's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her entire strategy, the DNA test, the months of preparation, the careful exposure of my true parentage had just been rendered meaningless by a single paragraph. Dad had known. He had always known. And he had chosen me anyway. Mom began to cry softly, her shoulders shaking. But I could not tell if her tears were from grief relief or fear of what was still to come. Mr. Harrison was not finished. He reached into the folder and withdrew a thick stack of documents bound with a rubber band. 8 months before his death, Mr. Carter hired a private investigator. He did so after Lily began pressuring him to modify his will in her favor. The investigator was instructed to document any activities that might indicate an attempt to manipulate the estate distribution. He slid the documents across the table toward Lily, who stared at them as if they might bite her. The report contains the following findings. Mr. Harrison continued. Consultations with 3 separate estate litigation attorneys beginning 7 months before Mr. Carter's death. Unauthorized withdrawals totaling $50,000 from Mr. Carter's personal accounts during the period of his illness when he was too weak to monitor his finances closely. Multiple conversations with family friends regarding, and I quote from the transcripts, upcoming changes to the family situation and making sure the right people get what they deserve. Each item landed like a hammer blow. I watched Lily's confident facade crumble piece by piece as the scope of her exposure became clear. And finally, Mr. Harrison said, his voice taking on a harder edge, the investigator documented the purchase of a DNA testing kit bought online 3 weeks before Emily's birthday, shipped to Lily's home address, and gift-wrapped for presentation at a family dinner. He placed a final document on the table, a handwritten note in my father's familiar script. Mr. Carter asked that I read this aloud. Lily, I knew what you were planning. I watched you scheme and manipulate for months, hoping you would change course. I gave you every opportunity to choose differently. You did not. These consequences are of your own making. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Lily's attorney seemed stunned by the thoroughness of the trap that had been laid. Then Lily found her voice again, though it had lost all its earlier confidence. I am contesting this will, she announced, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. This is obviously the result of manipulation. Emily must have influenced him somehow. I will take this to court and prove that she took advantage of a dying man. Her own attorney grabbed her arm and whispered urgently in her ear. I caught fragments of his warning, explicitly acknowledges, cannot claim fraud when disclosed. Any challenge will be frivolous. Lily shook him off. Mr. Harrison responded without emotion. The will contains a no-contest clause, valid under California law. Any heir who files a challenge without probable cause forfeits their entire inheritance. Given that the will explicitly acknowledges Emily's parentage and provides documented reasoning for Mr. Carter's decisions, any challenge on grounds of fraud or undue influence would almost certainly be deemed frivolous by the court. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Additionally, your $200,000 in outstanding loans from Mr. Carter are documented in these files as advances on your inheritance. If you forfeit your inheritance through a frivolous challenge, these advances convert to personal debts owed to the estate, debts that would need to be repaid in full. Lily's attorney was already gathering his papers, his expression making clear that he wanted no part of this case. Lily stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound, the full weight of her miscalculation finally crushing her. She had spent months building a case to prove I was not a Carter. She had not known that Dad spent those same months building a fortress around me, documenting her every move, anticipating her every argument. But as the shock of the moment began to settle, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat once more. There is one additional matter, he said, reaching for another envelope at the bottom of his folder. This pertains to an agreement made 35 years ago, an agreement that involves Emily's biological father. I was instructed to share this only after the primary will reading was complete. I felt my heart stop. The secret that had started everything was about to surface, and it would change everything I thought I knew about who I really was. The weeks following the will reading should have brought peace. Instead, they brought chaos. Lily refused to accept what had happened. Her attorney withdrew from her case the day after the reading, but she found another one willing to take her money and file a formal contest against the will. The grounds she claimed were undue influence and manipulation of a dying man, accusations so baseless they would have been laughable if they had not been so vicious. But Lily did not stop at legal action. 3 days after filing the contest, she appeared at my apartment building, pounding on my door and screaming threats loud enough for my neighbors to hear. She called me a thief, a fraud, a manipulator who had stolen what rightfully belonged to her. She threatened to destroy my career, to tell everyone I worked with that I was not who I claimed to be, to make sure I never knew a moment of peace for the rest of my life. What she did not notice in her rage was the security camera mounted above my door. The building had installed them 2 years earlier, with clearly posted signs reading, "Recording in progress," on every floor. Her entire tirade was captured in high-definition video, complete with audio. The mandatory mediation hearing took place 6 weeks later. Lily arrived with her new attorney, a man who looked increasingly uncomfortable as my lawyer, Sarah Chen, presented our response to the contest. Sarah was methodical and devastating. She began with the private investigator's report that Dad had commissioned documenting Lily's scheme from its earliest stages. She followed with the security footage of Lily's threatening visit to my apartment. Then came the text messages, dozens of them, showing a pattern of harassment and intimidation that had escalated steadily since the will reading. Finally, she presented evidence of Lily's 20-year history of emotional manipulation, including statements from family friends who had witnessed her behavior over the decades. The judge listened to everything with the expression of growing distaste. When Lily's attorney attempted to argue that the DNA evidence proved I had no rightful claim to the estate, the judge cut him off. The will explicitly acknowledged my parentage, she noted. The deceased had made his wishes clear, with full knowledge of all relevant facts. There was no fraud to uncover because nothing had been hidden. She dismissed the contest as frivolous and invoked the no contest clause. Lily forfeited her remaining 30% of the inheritance. The $200,000 she had borrowed from Dad over the years, previously documented as advances on her inheritance, converted automatically to personal debt owed to the estate. In the span of a single afternoon, Lily went from expecting to inherit everything to owing more money than her house was worth. I watched her face as the judge delivered the ruling. For just a moment, I saw something beneath the anger, a flicker of the little sister I remembered from childhood, before jealousy and entitlement had hardened her into someone I no longer recognized. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury, as she stormed out of the courtroom without a word. Mom came to see me that evening. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, diminished by the weight of secrets she had carried for 35 years. She sat on my couch with a cup of tea she never drank, and she finally told me the truth. Richard Hayes was not a stranger who had appeared briefly in my mother's life. He was my father's closest friend, his college roommate, the best man at my parents' wedding. When my parents discovered that Dad was infertile, their marriage nearly collapsed under the strain. Mom wanted children desperately. Dad felt like a failure. They separated for almost a year, during which time Mom found comfort with Richard, the one person who understood both of them, who loved them both, who wanted to help them find a way forward. When Mom discovered she was pregnant, the three of them made a decision together. Richard would step back completely, never claiming me as his own, never interfering in my upbringing. Dad would raise me as his daughter, giving me his name and his protection, and Richard would help save Carter Industries, which was failing at the time, providing the capital that kept our family business alive. 2 attorneys witnessed and documented the agreement, Mr. Harrison for my parents, and another lawyer for Richard. They established specific conditions for what would happen if the truth ever emerged. Mom wept as she told me this. She said she had always intended to tell me someday, but the right moment never came. She admitted that Lily's discovery of the secret at 16 had changed everything, giving her younger daughter leverage that she used ruthlessly for 2 decades. She apologized for the favoritism, for the neglect, for allowing fear to shape how she treated her own children. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I did not offer comfort. I simply told her I needed time to process everything she had said. The next day, Mr. Harrison called to explain the final piece of the puzzle. The agreement signed 35 years ago had included specific trigger conditions for a trust that Richard Hayes had established in my name. The trust would activate if either of 2 conditions were met: my non-biological relationship to Mr. Carter being formally acknowledged in legal proceedings, or Mr. Carter's will explicitly referencing my parentage upon reading. The will reading had satisfied the second condition, automatically notifying Richard's attorney to release the trust. Richard had died 5 years ago, but he had spent decades building this trust for me. He had added to it regularly, watching my life from a distance he had promised to maintain, never reaching out, but never looking away. His attorney delivered a package containing the trust documents and a letter Richard had written shortly before his death. I read his words alone in my apartment, tears streaming down my face. He wrote that he could not be my father in life because he had made a promise, and he was a man who kept his promises. But he had watched me from afar, seen my graduations, tracked my career, observed how I was treated by the family he had helped create. He saw how I struggled, how I was overlooked, how I built myself into someone strong, despite receiving so little support. His letter said, this was not guilt, this was pride. I was his greatest accomplishment, even though I never knew he existed. In the days that followed, I made decisions about how to handle everything I had inherited. I reviewed the estate's financial records personally and confirmed that Lily had withdrawn $50,000 from Dad's accounts during his final months when he was too ill to notice. Under California law, this constituted elder financial abuse, a prosecutable offense. I had every right to press charges. Instead, I chose a different path. Through my attorney, I offered Lily a choice: repay the $50,000 within 1 year or face criminal prosecution. Combined with the $200,000 she already owed and the loss of her inheritance, this would force her to sell her house and start over from nothing. But she would not go to prison. She would have a chance to rebuild if she was willing to take it. For Mom, I established a modest monthly allowance from the estate, enough to cover her basic needs, not enough to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. She would have to downsize to adjust to live with the consequences of choices made long ago. This was not forgiveness. This was boundaries with consequences. The difference mattered to me. In Richard Hayes' package, beneath the legal documents and the letter explaining 35 years of watching from afar, there was one more thing, a small wooden box I had not yet opened. I was not ready. But I knew whatever was inside represented a lifetime of love, from a father who chose to stay away so I could have a family, even if that family never deserved me. 3 months passed before I found the courage to open the wooden box. It sat on my nightstand through the final legal proceedings, through the sale of my apartment, through all the decisions that would reshape my life. Some nights I would pick it up and hold it, feeling its weight in my hands, knowing that whatever was inside represented something precious from a man I had never met. But I was not ready. I needed to finish becoming the person who deserved to receive it. The morning I finally opened it was unremarkable, a Sunday in late spring. Coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter, sunlight streaming through windows I had chosen myself. I lifted the lid slowly, and inside I found a watch. It was old, clearly well worn, the leather band softened by decades of use. The face was simple, no fancy complications, no expensive brand name, just honest craftsmanship that had stood the test of time. Beneath the watch lay a folded note written in handwriting I had never seen before, but somehow recognized as belonging to me. I wore this every day, Emily. Every time I checked it, I thought of you. I wondered if you were happy, if you were loved, if you were becoming the person I believed you could be. The answer to those first 2 questions was often no, and I couldn't interfere. That was the price of my promise, the cost of giving you a family I hoped would treat you better than they did. This watch counted every hour I wished I could have spent with you. Every birthday I wanted to call, every graduation I attended from the back row, leaving before anyone could see me, every time I saw you struggling and had to walk away. Now let it count the hours of the life you deserve, the life you earned, the life I always knew you would build for yourself. I held the watch against my chest and cried. Not the tears of grief I had expected, but something else entirely, the release of a loneliness I had carried for 35 years without understanding its source. I had spent my entire life feeling invisible, unloved, like something was fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of the affection others receive so easily. Now I understood that I had never been alone. Someone had been watching, caring, proud of me, loving me from a distance I never knew existed. The weight I had carried was not proof of my inadequacy. It was simply the price of a promise made before I was born by a man who loved me enough to let me go. I put on the watch that morning, and I have not taken it off since. The Carter family home sold within weeks of listing. I did not attend the final walkthrough or the closing. I hired professionals to pack up what remained and donate anything I did not want, which was nearly everything. Too many memories lived in those rooms, and none of them were warm. The money from the sale, combined with my inheritance from both fathers, gave me options I had never imagined possible. But I did not want a mansion or a luxury apartment or any of the status symbols that had mattered so much to the family I was leaving behind. I bought a cottage, small, old, slightly worn around the edges, exactly like me. It had a garden that had been neglected for years, full of potential, waiting to be coaxed back to life. The kitchen was tiny, but bright. The bedroom looked out over a pond where ducks gathered in the mornings. The first night I slept there, I listened to the silence and realized I had never known peace before. I had only known the absence of conflict, which is not the same thing at all. I filled my cottage with books I had always wanted to read, but never had time for. I learned to garden, making mistakes and learning from them without anyone telling me I was doing it wrong. I painted the walls colors I loved without asking permission or seeking approval. For the first time in 35 years, every decision was mine alone. No one to please, no one to prove wrong, no one measuring my worth against standards I could never meet. I discovered slowly and with some surprise that I actually liked the person I was when no one was telling me I was not enough. My relationship with Mom settled into something distant but functional. We spoke on the phone once a month, brief conversations about nothing important. She asked about my health, my work, my garden. I answered politely without offering details. We did not spend holidays together. We did not pretend to be close. The warmth that might have existed between us had been sacrificed long ago on the altar of secrets and favoritism, and I had no interest in pretending otherwise. She had made her choices. Now she lived with them. There was no punishment in my distance, just the natural consequence of decades spent being her lesser daughter. With Lily, there was nothing at all. She called repeatedly in the weeks after the mediation, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to furious accusations. I deleted them without listening past the first few words. She sent emails I never opened. She tried reaching me through mutual acquaintances who quickly learned not to pass along her messages. When she was forced to sell her house to cover the debts she owed, the $200,000 in loans, the $50,000 in restitution, the legal fees from her failed contest, she sent me a letter. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope and almost threw it away unopened. But something made me read it just once. She wrote about how unfair everything was, how I had stolen what belonged to her, how Dad had been manipulated and the courts had failed her, and none of this was her fault. She asked for money. She asked for forgiveness. She asked me to remember that we were sisters, as if that word still meant something after everything she had done. I read the letter once, then dropped it in the trash. I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not even the grim pleasure of watching karma deliver its verdict. Just nothing. Lily's ruin was not revenge. It was simply what happened when a lifetime of manipulation finally met a wall it could not charm or threaten or scheme its way through. She had built her own trap and walked into it willingly. I owed her nothing, not even the energy of hatred. The idea for the foundation came to me on a quiet evening, sitting in my garden as the sun went down. I thought about all the children growing up right now in homes like the one I had survived, the unfavored ones, the overlooked ones, the ones whose worth was measured against siblings who could do no wrong. I thought about how different my life might have been if someone had reached out, offered help, told me that the way I was treated was not my fault and not my destiny. I named it the Hayes Carter Foundation, honoring both the father who raised me, knowing I was not his blood, and the father who loved me from a distance he chose to keep. The foundation provides therapy scholarships for adults healing from family trauma, career mentoring for those rebuilding their lives after escaping toxic systems, and emergency support for anyone who needs help getting out. It is small for now, but it will grow. And every person it helps will be proof that pain can become purpose, that wounds can become wisdom, that the unloved child can grow up to spread love in ways her family never imagined. Tonight I sit in my garden as the sun sets, wearing Richard's watch, a book closed on my lap. My cottage glows warm behind me. The ducks have settled on the pond for the evening. I am not waiting for anyone. I am not trying to prove anything. I am not healing, I am healed. I look at the watch on my wrist and think of two men who both chose to love me in their own imperfect ways. One raised me, knowing the truth, and left me his legacy. One watched from afar and left me his pride. Both of them saw something in me that I could not see in myself for 35 years. My sister gave me a DNA test to prove I did not belong. Instead, it proved that two fathers, one who raised me, one who watched from afar, both chose me when they did not have to. In the end, the greatest inheritance was not the money or the property. It was finally understanding that I was always worthy of love. I just had to stop waiting for the wrong people to see it. Emily's story teaches us something that many of us learn too late in life. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. The people who should love you the most sometimes fail you the deepest, and that failure says everything about them and nothing about you. If you grew up as the overlooked child, the unfavored one, the daughter, who could never measure up no matter how hard she tried, please hear this. Their inability to see your value was their blindness, not your flaw. This story also reminds us that secrets and manipulation eventually collapse under their own weight. Lily spent 20 years building a fortress of lies and schemes, believing she was securing her future. Instead, she was constructing her own prison. The truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, those who built their lives on deception find themselves with nothing solid left to stand on. But perhaps the most important lesson is, this healing does not require revenge. Emily did not destroy her sister. She simply stopped protecting her from consequences. She did not punish her mother. She simply established boundaries. There is profound power in choosing peace over vengeance, in walking away whole rather than staying to fight. Sometimes the greatest victory is building a beautiful life and letting that be your answer to everyone who doubted you. If this story touched your heart, if you saw yourself in Emily's struggle, or if you simply love stories about justice and healing, I hope you will subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Or have you had to establish boundaries with people who were supposed to love you? Your stories matter, and I would love to hear them.